I'm
Okay, so what I'll do is I know John Brabant will be here. He may be tearing home on his way home from the State House. So what I'll do is I'll call the meeting to order at 4:03.
Oh, there's Don.
John's coming?
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, so we have everyone. I need to give my dog a cookie. Hold on. Um, Okay, adjustments to the agenda. I would suggest again, like I did at the last meeting, that, Brian, we start with the future land use plan, because that's really our focus right now. It's really important that we hit on this, and I want to give it all the time it needs in every meeting. So then when we take up our other discussion items, they're not cutting into the time that we need to devote to future land use. Now, Eli, does you have to go to another meeting?
Yeah, I need to leave by 4:45 today.
4:45. All right.
Yeah,
well,
I think this was, kind of the reasoning for.
I got
I
you.
agree.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been what you're saying, but I think, we discussed this over email of like,
Okay.
basically just because of time constraints of the meeting.
I actually answered my question while I was talking. So we'll leave it as is, and 4:45. What time do you want to start, Brian? All right, 4:50. Okay, so, sorry, we'll leave it as is. So right now, I just want to do a roll call. There's myself, Christian, Will, person I don't know in the meeting room.
Yeah, we have a member of the public here. Would you like to identify yourself, Stephen?
Steve Whitaker, Montpelier.
Hi, okay, welcome. James Crafts. James, you're from Warren, correct? Pretty sure.
Yeah,
Doug, I see Doug, I see Mike, John Brabant. I see Brian, Renee Carpenter.
yes, hi.
And what town are you from, Renee?
I'm
Are you?
from East Montpelier. I'm a member of the public
Okay,
until I will be appointed as an alternate at the next select board meeting.
okay, great, welcome. And then we
Thank
have
you.
iPhone 171.
Hi, that's Selena Barton. I'm also a member of the public from East Montpelier and a member of the Planning Commission. And I'm so that Renee doesn't have to repeat herself and others, I thought I would listen in if that's okay.
Perfect, thank you. And James, you're from Warren, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, sometimes I have a good memory. Okay, so we do have publics. Does the public have any public comment?
I have a brief comment. I was here for the last commission meeting last week. And they were discussing the major projects review rules and what the other said.
oh, the process.
But that's, I understand, tends to apply only when a project is being reviewed under Act 250 is what triggers the jurisdiction of the regional major projects committee. And we're in an environment right now where there's huge buffer zones, which are attempting to circumvent Act 250 review, even a project like Country Club Road with major traffic impacts. And I'm concerned that there needs to be an adjustment to the trigger for compatibility with the regional plan and major project trigger for such a thing. And I don't know whether this committee, sounds like you're pressed for time to discuss it today, but it could be on a future agenda.
Yeah, I'd also say that probably the best place to take your question here first is to our project review committee, because that's where we deal with certain Act 250 projects. And we could answer your question. There are people that go to that committee that I think can help answer your question better there. And we would also say that, yes, the regional committee here is aware of this. And we were discussing where that fits into our future land use map conversation. John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Alice. To Steve's question, and I serve on the project review committee and have off and on for a number of decades, actually. He's correct that historically our triggers have been either, well, for what is considered a larger project that might connote a project which could create a substantial regional impact or regional implications. We've looked to Act 250 applications in the last couple decades. Also applications at the Public Utility Commission. Although that's just been kind of a default approach. And I would just like to agree with Steve and his concern where we just continue just to simply follow that approach and not look at projects based on scale and projects based on potential impact because they weren't they didn't fit under the jurisdiction of Act 250 or the Public Utility Commission, that I think we might as well just close down a project review committee because most of those occur near urban areas, and those urban areas and their growth areas are going to be, going forward exempted from 250. So we're gonna have to take that under consideration and give that serious thought. Thank you, Steve. And we may, to the extent that our plan implicates that committee and its responsibilities, we may wish to also, going forward, get some clarity added to our plan in terms of what we should be evaluating in terms of project size and impacts.
Right.
The-
So,
I had one more issue, is that we have a somewhat flawed planning process in Montpelier with this Country Club Road project. It's not in our city plan, which is headed to the city council and then to the region for review. And the currently adopted or readopted or extended regional plan has the Country Club Road property in a rural zone. And for us to be trying to get growth center designation this year and a TIF next year, when we don't have adequate transportation capacity or even a master plan, raises the issue of how this committee could facilitate or help, and or is there a conflict of interest having our planner sit on this committee or vote on this committee, where attempts are being made to circumvent statute, and anyway, I'll leave it at that and just raise the issue that we need clarity from this regional plan future land use map, which might not be adopted till next March, I'm beginning to understand, and how that might affect Montpelier's aspirations to get a growth center application in this September.
Yeah, it shows.
Just a simple thing, right?
yeah. Christian, do you want to address this?
Yeah, well, I just have the one comment, which is to state that while this doesn't stand, we have a conflict of interest policy that everyone has reviewed and signed at some point in their tenure on our commission, but also that this is an advisory committee and that it's not making any decisions for the commission. And in that sense, I don't know if that impacts how we discuss any members in their role, both with their municipalities and as members of this committee. I know we have some other planning commissioners who are planning commissioners in their municipality who also serve on this committee. So something staff can certainly go back and look at our conflict of interest book for policy for clarity on. But I think it's overlaps with a number of staff members as well, and it's something we've dealt with in the past.
John?
Yeah, to Steve's conflict of interest assertion or concern, the expectation is that representatives on the Regional Planning Commission, which include obviously people on the subcommittee, will in fact come to the board and these subcommittees representing their committee. My dog's gagging. Will come to their committees in the commission with the perspective, with the opinion, with the position of the community that they represent. We are representative government. It's, to my mind, no different than a select board member voting on a road budget that will result in improvements to the very road that the select board member and their family live on. I've had that actually argued, believe it or not, to our select board in the past. And, you cannot be on a select board unless you live in that town. And by virtue of living in that town, you live on a town road. So that would negate any select board member from participating in any budget discussion on any road ever. So we could never do that. It's a similar application here. It's necessary that I guess Mike Miller in this case have that interest. It's not a conflict. It's not a pecuniary interest. He's not the developer. I would suggest that that's not well placed, Steve, but thank you anyway.
That's all I had, thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, so we can move on to the approval of the minutes. And what I'm looking for is, I've gone through them, and I think, Will, did you write the minutes?
Mhm.
You write really good minutes. Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm looking for approval of the minutes. And Doug has made the motion, and I need a second. John, second this? Okay, so all those,
I've got one question.
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, when I was looking at maybe the second page of the minutes on lines 5 to 7, the committee members were generally expressed a preference for keeping farming and agricultural lands that are conserved as mapped under rural conservation instead of rural agriculture and forestry. And I wasn't sure when I read that whether that was where we ended up, but I just wanted to double check to see where the other members of the committee remembered on that one. Everything else looked great. That was just the only one that kind of made me think I didn't know if we actually said that.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay.
Specifically, because
As do I.
I had to keep running it around in my head to understand it, okay? And I think what it says is we generally expressed a preference, but we didn't come down with it. We didn't make it definitive. It was really more, we discussed it and said, this is where we lie here, but we need more information to continue, type thing.
Okay, I'm good with that.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Mike. Anyone else have a comment on the minutes? If not, can I get approval of the minutes from our last meeting? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so good, we've approved our minutes. So now what we can do is go on to one of our discussion items that is on our spreadsheet that Brian created for us and is on the shared drive there. And Eli, I'm really glad you're here today. I think it was really Doug and I that brought the short-term rental discussion to the forefront. And I like your outline on what we can do. And I think that's where we'd be at discussing that. I do want to point out that besides the state regulations, I think, which is Act 10. Do you know if I'm correct on that? Anyone?
I don't know.
Okay. Where your state regulations come from, there's also Department of Environmental Conservation has a set of short-term rental drinking water and wastewater system fact sheet. So they do have their own, they do have their regulations, kind of regulations on short-term rentals. And basically what it does, and we actually had this experience here on my road in Waitsfield, is the occupancy that's advertised and um, can occur for short-term rentals follow a typical um, wastewater system capacity, like a one bedroom. Basically, each bedroom is 2 people. So if you have a 3-bedroom home, your rental can be for 6 people. And there's a leeway there that it can go up to 8 here and there at times. And what some communities are doing, and they did this in Warren to beef up that rental number, is when they wrote their draft of their new short-term rental ordinance, they made it clearer that 1 bedroom is 2 people, 2 bedrooms is 4 people. So where DEC might have a little bit of leeway there, in saying, yeah, 3-bedroom house, you could have 7 or 8, which was what happened here on our road. Some communities have written the ordinance to like specifically follow the 1-bedroom, 2 people, 1 bedroom is 2 people. And depending on the number of bedrooms you have, that's the number of occupants you can rent to. I can put this in the chat. And the other thing I'd like to recommend, if I can find it again, is, yeah, I came across, sent to me by actually our Conservation Commission member. There's a group called the Northern Forest Center, which is, they represent forests and projects and resources in the New England area. And they had a short-term rental webinar recently. That was one of the best webinars I've gone to, because it looked at different communities where you would look at Lake Placid in New York, or a very, very small town in the middle of Maine. They looked at Burke here in Vermont, Groton, I believe, in New Hampshire. And the interesting thing was the different size of the communities. They all had similar issues in that they were not just communities, they were also resort areas where people came for recreation, etc., and all going through the same issues that these different community and recreation areas had. And they all had needs to start regulating short-term rentals. And they all had different focuses on what they found and what they decided to regulate in their ordinances. And I'll put that link to that. There is a recording of it, and I'll put that up online too. So just with that, Doug, you have some stuff to say?
Well, just a few specific responses to what I thought was a very good package and well presented.
Mhm.
The strategy 3.7 that talks about providing assistance to develop rental registries. I think that should say assistance providing rental registries and ordinances. I don't see why the Regional Planning Commission wouldn't be a resource for help drafting an ordinance, just like it is for zoning ordinances and other things that towns do. And I think the Regional Plan Committee has an opportunity to, or excuse me, the commission has an opportunity to become a resource in sort of a confusing time for the towns here and
Mhm.
help be a place that you can find out what regulations exist and what do ordinances that try to regulate STRs look like. So I would like to see 3.7 to include registries and ordinances.
A number of these communities and towns that I talked about in this webinar found that they needed, they either hired consultants or they needed that assistance, Doug, in developing their ordinances.
Right, but there's no reason the Regional Plan Commission can't be a
Absolutely.
resource as well.
Absolutely. I think so too. John?
Please don't take this as a point of disagreement, just for further information. Zoning ordinances and things of a legal nature like that have historically, when I was on the select board, their development has been assisted by the League of Cities and Towns, and we'd even run stuff past their attorney because they have legal counsel on staff. So that they were always helpful in that regard. And I think every municipality in Vermont is a member of the league. So this is
Yeah.
just a point of information.
And every town has their own, well, at least our town has, I can't say that, but our town has their own attorney.
But our strategies throughout the housing section talk about the Regional Planning Commission will assist town with this goal and will assist with that. And it's to the extent you can assist. You can't provide legal advice, but you can provide information. Hey, there's 3 other towns in the region that are facing this, and here's what they're working with. And statewide, this is what's going on. And, they can be a resource.
The representative on that webinar from the Lake Placid area, with the consultants that they use there, said that if you do your regulations as ordinances rather than bylaws that go into your bylaws document, they're less challenged as ordinances than if they're in the bylaws. Now, she just said that, I'm just bringing that up. But the first thing when I talked to our planning and zoning administrator about was that specific thing, running it past the town attorney.
Sure.
Yeah, and makes sense.
Right, but the regional plan can do a good job of presenting what the issues are as we propose to do, and can list what towns have ordinances related to short-term rentals, which Waterbury has one, so maybe there are others in our region that do. I'm not sure that there are. And again, I think the Regional Planning Commission should hold itself out as a resource to the extent that it is able to help, just like with any other problem. For ordinance, there's not a reason to shy away from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to the town to set the final.
Sure, the town has to ask for help if they want it.
Right, and it's also very interesting is the towns all really decide on what the registry fee will be. And some are quite stiff and some are not, Eli, do you have anything to say?
I
'Cause
think
I got you
it would be-
involved in this, yeah.
Yeah, it would be helpful to know what we're putting in to change, or make additions to our strategies in the regional plan update. And then I think we need to beef up in the housing chapter, the short-term rentals. There's a brief description of what a short-term rental is, but I think putting more in there about not a specific policy, regional policy, but more about what can be done. So talk about taxation, the ordinances and registries are probably what I would focus on in those. So if anybody has any feedback on those, and what they want that to look like, otherwise I'll just draft some language to add into the chapter.
Okay, and I think myself, when I got into my first discussion on this with a select board member and with a select board member, or actually a person who used to be a planning commission in Warren, who drafted their ordinances. We talked, we talked about the issue of a regional ordinance does not work because towns each have their own reasons and have met their own stress points with STRs that are bringing them to the table here. So I think it's important that maybe we could put in there that the first step is for the towns to have a discussion to identify what issues it is they want to address. Like
I
why, like why? What are the problems you want to address here?
Isn't that more appropriate for a municipal plan? And if you're talking about what individual towns want, it should be addressed in their municipal plan.
Well, I can think about that.
In 23 different positions on short-term rentals. Doesn't seem like it'll make for good reading and it isn't really all that informative. I think the strategies for addressing issues that arise from short-term rentals certainly makes a lot of sense for inclusion, but beyond that, I'm not sure I see the benefit of adding that level of detail about individual towns.
Well, we wouldn't add details. We would just say that that's, part of the process. I mean, I wouldn't go into every town and every ordinance and every detail. I would like, and I'm still scratching my head about getting the information about how short-term rentals have affected housing availability and affordable housing availability. And Eli, I think in our housing chapter already, we're talking about when you do development, okay? And this is already a topic of conversation here in Waitsfield, is say you put in 30 new duplexes or 16 or something like that. How do towns have a strategy and a way to say, no, they will be for this housing, affordable and middle income.
Right, you could have inclusionary zoning. If you have inclusionary zoning, you can set those guidelines for how much is affordable or basically what the type of housing looks like and who the housing is gonna serve. So we could put something in there about, it'd probably be more on the land use side of things, but
Yeah.
about inclusionary zoning.
But what people are concerned about is you put them in and people are going to buy them up for short-term housing. Rentals, because that's what real estate agents here, especially in the valley, are seeing. People aren't coming here to buy homes to live in. They're looking for short-term rental investments.
Yeah, and I think Burlington has really addressed that by
Yeah,
putting it into their ordinance that the short-term rental, the definition of short-term rental in Burlington is that it has to be owner occupied. So
Mhm.
it cuts the knees right out, out from under anybody trying to live afar and have a short-term rental in Burlington. So that is, I think you can shape what your short-term rental market looks like through those ordinances quite a bit. So that's what I think we would include in the chapter is kind of a blanket statement that not all municipalities want their short-term rental market to look the same, and that's okay. And here's different tools that a municipality can use to shape what they do want it to look like. And I do
Yes.
agree, a community discussion is an important part of that process.
Yeah, that's a concise way of what I was trying to say. I was sort of meandering around, but yes. Doug, you have anything else, or John, or?
I just get back to the point. I don't see a reason not to offer to provide technical assistance, whatever the other level is that we provide on a number of topics to towns that are looking for assistance in addressing short-term rentals and creating an ordinance. And it doesn't have to be drafting the ordinance. It doesn't have to be legal advice, but it can be an overview of what other towns are doing. It can be technical assistance, just like so many other things that we offer in our goals.
So this is Jim Crafts from Warren. So as Alice said, we have proposed an ordinance to our select board. Well, we're trying to portray it not as regulatory, but more as a registry at this point. And one of the reasons that we were interested in this is, you know, to understand STR's effect on housing. But I would agree with Mike here is I personally spent a lot of time reading all the other towns' regulations to try to understand, okay, what do we want to pick and choose out of this? And not being an expert in this field, it would have been helpful to have someone, hey, give me the three places to go look and start there. So it was kind of hunt and peck for me anyway. But I will add that, I think you folks have already spoke with this, is that each town is different. I mean, if you look at Warren, the majority of our rentals are indeed condominiums, right? They're not houses. And they've been in the rental market forever. So it's not like some of this, hasn't really changed. I mean, people have been doing this for a long time. Now, it just so happens that where they advertise and how they engage with their customer has changed through these online platforms. But this has been ongoing for decades.
One thing I learned from the webinar that Alice was referring to is that with the registries, a cautionary tale from at least one of the presenters was not to have the fees for those be exorbitant, that if you have high fees, it can open you up to legal liability. And that, if the purpose of the registry is to kind of be a stick to the short-term rental market, that it's maybe not the best mechanism. But using the registry to get an idea of how many of the units, how many short-term rental units are in your municipality or whatever region you choose to do a registry for, and how that's affecting the availability and the price of housing is a good way to do that. So that just though they did talk to that legal liability potential if you're charging really high fees for the registry.
Yeah, we charged a pretty nominal fee for the registry, so I think it was a couple $100. We weren't really looking to go out and kind of use that as a resource for revenue, at least not yet.
And you can also, again, these short-term, what drove Stowe and what's driving, I think maybe Burke a little bit, is that, and I talked about this with Dan Raddick, is the short-term rentals they are using services in the town. Stowe really had a thing with its fire department, got really sick of all the calls they had to go out on. So, a couple of things. If you want to buy a registry, buy the software, your registry fees can help you pay for it. And also, you can then bring in some funds that pay towards the services that the STRs use. Doug?
Yeah, Waterbury's registry goes after all rentals, long-term and short-term, in order to establish more information about what is housing. So is it owner occupied? Is it long-term? Is it short-term? So the short-term rental information is brought into the registry, but it's only part of the process.
Okay.
I think that's a really good idea. Kudos to Waterbury.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it makes it more palatable, perhaps.
Yeah. And you get it, yeah, and then you can get it, yeah. Yeah, kudos to Waterbury, wow. And that's a big process, I would think. Yeah, okay. Well, we're getting on towards 20 of, and Eli has to leave at 4:45. So we can continue with this in the next item on that, on the list about the infrastructure. We can continue that at the next meeting. But Eli, can you just give us a quick rundown on the regional housing consortium you were talking about in the Board of Commissioners meeting that may be forming?
Sure, so we're forming with Central Vermont Economic Development Corporation, what we're calling Central Vermont Housing Development Roundtable. So it'll be a roundtable and then workshops. Our first one is on May 21st, which will be a kickoff meeting at the Old Labor Hall in Barry. And then the subsequent ones will be around topics. We have quite a long list of topics already formed, but hopefully the topics for subsequent meetings will come out of the workshopping of that first meeting. And it's to really discuss, there's meetings that are for direct services and to address the homelessness crisis already happening regionally, but there's not really a regular meeting to talk about housing development. So the Economic Development Corporation and us as the RPC put our heads together to try to get it'll be a quarterly meeting.
Okay. And who are the organizers? The-
We are with Central Vermont Economic Development Corporation.
Okay. And you'll keep us aware of this.
Yes, I will, and I'll send out materials very soon. I'm just
Okay,
getting the
great.
last feedback on the.
Okay, great. Does anybody have anything else to say on short-term rentals right now? And I think that was,
Is there a point of resolution? I mean, if we're gonna come back to this, what are we gonna talk about? Do we need to come back to this? It'd be nice if we could check these things off the list as we go through the conversations and not just have standing meeting items.
well, I'm not ready to worry about that right now, Brian. We're just starting this process. And Eli just said that she's going to draft some narrative for the in the housing chapter for us. So at the very least, we would like to take a look at that. And then we can make a decision from there. So yes, and there's other articles on there. I think if we come back to this, it's not going to be as long, but I mean, our next focus is on the land use chapter, which is where we're at with you, so.
Well, I thought our next focus was on housing construction costs. That's the
No,
next.
we just decided that we don't have the time to talk about that because Eli has to leave at 4:45. And I think Eli would be part of that conversation. So, and we want to get you on so that we can focus on the land use chapter, which is extremely important right now. So committee members feel good about that process?
Yeah.
Okay. So Eli, thank you
Yeah, absolutely.
very
And
much.
I do have notes I can share out for if the construction conversation gets pushed to next time. I've got some notes we could send out beforehand. So,
Great.
I'm sorry I have to leave today.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. We can work with that. Thank you very much, Eli.
I do suggest if anybody hasn't looked at Act 479,
Mhm.
there's an act that, I think it's in Senate, Economic Housing General right
Mhm.
now. That there's a big housing bill. It's not looking at making some of the changes we've seen in previous years. It's looking at supporting some of those changes. And a big part of that is looking at infrastructure. So there's a piece in there around the Vermont infrastructure, sustainability infrastructure fund that would go through the bond bank. So in these conversations that we're having around construction, recognizing how much of the cost is attributed to infrastructure. And, you know, recognizing that there's a bill going through right now that could help with those
Yeah,
infrastructure
great.
costs. It would
Eli,
be
what was the
a-
number of that bill?
It's 479, H 479.
Oh, it's H 479. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's in the House. Okay, great.
It's
Not
in
an
Senate
act
now.
until it gets passed.
yeah, it's not an act. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah, it's a bill. Hopeful. I'm hopeful, I guess.
Okay, thanks.
It
Um,
was passed out of the House, so.
Yeah, it's in Senate.
It's
now
in
we're on the
Senate.
Senate.
It's
Okay.
in Senate now, yeah.
Okay, so our next agenda item. I lost my place. Sorry about that. Our next agenda item will be future land use map updates. Brian, you're on.
Great, thanks, Alice. Hopefully at this point, you've all had a chance to take a look at both the methodology document that we shared before the last meeting and then the slides that I presented at the Board of Commissioners meeting last week. I thought I'd start by asking if anyone has any questions about that.
Yeah, I did. Let me find them. I actually wrote them down, Brian, so I would remember. Yeah, my first question is. I can't find it. I was wondering again if you could just remind me why you've decided to work from the rural regions out to you're going out to in towards the village centers?
I mean, the short version, Alice, is because if we are gonna take any meaningful steps towards conservation, environmental protection, it makes sense to me to set those aside before we start picking all the places that are gonna be developed.
I would just add to that, Alice, that when I look at this, I know Brian hasn't said this explicitly, but I feel like it's, yeah, working from the out to in, but it's also working from the in to out. And they'll kind of converge in the middle, and that'll be what's currently the gray space.
Yeah, and I mean, that's absolutely right, Christian. That's the approach, and as I'll talk about in a few minutes. I've been working on the downtown center and village center zones since our last meeting, and you know, really what I see is, as Christian mentioned, sort of creeping in from the outer regions, outer portions of our region, creeping out in terms of the more dense development from some of these more centralized locations, and then really relying on the regional plan committee as well as the full board at that point for input on sort of what happens to the places that remain. And, you know, do we push those more out to the rural and conservation? Do we need more space to actually be able to hit housing targets, either regionally or in isolated locations within the region? And, you know, at that point, we'll have more information to make decisions about how far out we want to push the higher density style development that we're anticipating in the future.
Okay. And is development the reason why we're looking at this? There's a conservation area, and then we talked about that other area, the agriculture conservation area.
So there's those three rural classes, the rural conservation, rural ag and forest, and rural general. And I listed them in order of most conservation to least conservation there, so that rural ag forest is kind of the class that spans the more development focused to the more conservation focused.
And the idea is to have more areas for development. Doesn't the governor want that? To have more land
Well,
that
we
can be
still have local
developed?
land use control, Alice, so the governor can want all he wants, just like I can. It's still gonna be up to the municipalities in large part. But, that rural general is gonna be a little bit more the catch-all. In my estimation, and that the ag forest is really gonna be a set aside for maintaining and preserving the working landscape. I mean, it's not that rural general completely goes away from that. I'm trying to think of, I mean, like, it's gonna be like your East Warren Road, in the Mad River Valley, right? Where there's some current use land, but there's a lot of scattered single-family residential on 5 to 10 acre minimum lots.
Okay. All right, I get it.
I see
Doug?
Doug's-
Yeah, quick question. Property that is in the current use program, is that categorized in the conserved rural?
I'm sorry, in the conserve what?
In the conserved portion as opposed to ag forest?
So it's, it'll start out in the ag forest, but I don't know that every parcel of current use land will remain in the ag forest. And that really requires more of a landscape level evaluation of things like interior forest blocks and habitat connectivity. And my inclination is for those areas that are highly valuable as interior forest blocks or connectors for our traveling species, that we push those to the rural conservation. And for the land that's less valuable from that perspective, but still quite valuable from an ag and forestry perspective, that would, those current use lands would remain in that rural ag forestry category.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Other questions?
I had one, it'll come to me eventually. or I'll
Alice,
find
you
it.
said you wrote them down this time.
Oh, maybe I remember, and maybe Christian's part of this question. So we're looking at, what is it, is it an Act 181 or for the,
Yep.
for the procedures and processes to develop land use, future land use plan, right? Now, Christian, remind me, didn't VAPTA do this too?
So that's absolutely right. Ultimately, the Land Use Review Board will review future land use maps. But to assist in that process, VAPTA, through our planners, Brian, Will, all participated, put together the methodology. And this methodology really is the foundation statewide that we're using to take a first crack of the future land use maps. There's nothing to say that it has to follow word for word the methodology. The methodology is not the statute, but it does take the statute into account, and just it makes it sort of an easy starting spot. But yeah, the methodology that when Brian refers to when he's talking about the methodology document is that VAPTA created document.
Okay, VAPTA created. Okay, and is that 181?
No, that is not 181. 181 is where much of the statute was enacted. But the methodology was in your packet last regional plan committee. It's the almost most recent version, penultimate version of the methodology.
Gotcha, okay.
I don't want to introduce error, but I think I'd say I'm like 70% sure that, please correct me if I'm wrong, folks, Act 181 mandated VAPTA develop this methodology, is that
Yes.
right? Okay,
Possible.
cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that,
By-
I think that's the
By
connection.
January, I think of this year.
Yeah.
That's
And
what I recall, it might have been December, but it.
structurally,
last
that
year.
was their sort of to feed into the land use review board and help them get set up as well. Yeah.
Mhm. So, yeah, so,
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind that methodology was to provide some measure of consistency on a statewide basis with the understanding that there will be particular instances within every region, almost certainly that are gonna require individual thought.
Right,
Mhm.
right. Even, so I'll just give an example of an area where the methodology is not fixed and clear. So for some areas like the four, I'll call them urban land use areas, you really need to almost follow parcel lines because it's going to be reviewed as part of these tier processes and designation programs. But when we start at the rural conservation, we have more flexibility, so it really can follow, like Brian was outlining, the landscape scale interpretation. And I've seen some regions, even can see it's following a topo line, for example, in some places. So that's an area where it will differ from one region to the next, and how some of those future land use areas are interpreted.
so Act 181 also did say these are the categories. And then ordered BAPTA to go define that methodology that you saw, how to impact
Gotcha.
them. And then
Okay.
there's a little wiggle room in that. We can't just make up 5 new categories.
Make up
They
some
weren't in
new
Act 181.
categories. We can make up some new categories.
Yeah.
We're not strictly limited to the 10, but ideally, for the sake of consistency, we wouldn't want to get too crazy.
Mhm.
For example, the land under the interstate, is that rural general or is that rural conservation?
Mm.
That's Graffitiville.
Yeah, really.
See, there's our new zone.
If Keith has his way, it'll be half as much land.
right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions from folks? Okay, so a couple other things to update you on. Some staff, myself included, and the rest of the community development team will be meeting with the land use review board at the end of the month. And that's really to talk about how things are going, challenges we're encountering, and, let's see, I think there's a third item there. And it will be the Cvrpc and also the Lamoille County Planning Commission will have representatives there as well. And so it's sort of, I believe they're doing this with all of the regional planning commissions throughout the state. And it's sort of an informal conversation about the way things are going with the development of the future land use map. This will also, I think, set the stage for when we get to the point of bringing the map in front of the board, the land use review board, for their approval. We'll have already highlighted some of the issues that we see, so hopefully that means fewer surprises when it comes to the final presentation of the map, or what will hopefully be the interim final presentation of the map until it's requires updates at some point in the future. So we can keep folks updated on that, and certainly any feedback or other content that comes out of that meeting, we'll be happy to report out on at the next regional plan committee. We, as some staff met today as well to talk about the tiers, and in particular, which municipalities we think will be pursuing which tiers for the downtown centers, village centers, planned growth areas, and village areas. And have a short list of those that we feel like certainly make sense for that tier 1B, and then for a few of the municipalities, maybe it's a bit more aspirational to get to that 1B. It certainly seems like Montpelier is probably our best candidate to go after that tier 1A status. And just a quick step back in terms of the distinction between tier 1A and 1B. The short version is for tier 1B, you're exempt for residential developments under 50 units, exempt from Act 250 oversight, whereas with tier 1A, you're exempt from Act 250 oversight for development in general. So we talked about, again, Montpelier as being a fairly logical tier 1A. Sounds like Berlin is interested in, certainly in 1B status in the short-ish term, with an eye towards achieving 1A, tier 1A at some point in the future. Other likely candidate towns, municipalities include Berry City for 1B, as well as Waterbury. And then I think there's a handful of to be determined municipalities in terms of whether they want to pursue that 1B status, and or whether they are able to present self-certify that they have the qualifications to manage the exemptions under a tier 1B status. So that could include places like, one step back. Northfield also likely candidate for tier 1B. Potentially on the fringe would include places like Waitsfield, Cabot, Plainfield, and I'm missing one, Will, that you remember. I think those were the other sort of logical candidates, maybe Berrytown.
Berrytown,
yeah, Berrytown for a portion of the town as well. And so with that tier 1B status, the towns are essentially opting in and self-certifying that they have both the bandwidth and the technical capacity to provide oversight for development up to 50 units. And now, this is a staff discussion. Some staff have had specific conversations with representatives from these municipalities, but the next step really in this part of the conversation will happen once the draft map is prepared and we go out and meet with select boards and planning commissions for the individual municipalities, and we talk about the benefits and challenges of the different tiers, and to get a bit of a more of a firm opinion on whether a particular municipality wants to pursue the 1A or 1B, tier 1A or 1B status, or if they're happy just remaining in the tier 2. And for those of you that remember from a couple weeks ago, I described that, the tier 1 status as conveying some exemptions from state oversight. Tier 3 status is decided by the land use review board, and that is for a conservation overlay, and everything that's not tier 1 or tier 3 is tier 2. And in a sense, you could say that tier 2 is just business as usual in terms of the way that permitting decisions are made.
So tier 3 is more of the conserved area.
Well, we need to broaden our language a little bit. Eskimos have like 50 words for snow. I kind of feel like we're gonna need to get there with conservation if we're gonna do it right. There
Okay,
is the rural conservation, which we can designate area as, but there is also a tier 3 conservation overlay, which will be an overlay that is developed by the state, and we then put on top of our map, and there will be additional restrictions, is my understanding, that will come along with that tier 3 designation.
all right.
Yeah.
Moortown is also gonna try for 1B.
Yes, thank you. Moortown is another candidate for 1B. Moortown is trying to pursue the neighborhood development area designation as part of the three-town effort with Moortown, Duxbury, and Waterbury. So essentially Waterbury's got excess wastewater capacity, and Moortown and Duxbury have some undeveloped land that's relatively proximate to the wastewater infrastructure. So that is something that staff is currently helping those three towns deliberate.
Oh, that's interesting. What would be, give me an example of the technical resources a town would have to say it has?
So the
for
capacity
1B.
to review permits and to meet all of the obligations under a permit review that maybe otherwise would have been carried out under an Act 250 proceeding.
I don't think they explicitly state that it has to be like, they have to have staff on hand who will do the exact same review as the Act 250 district commissions do, but that is kind of the intent of Act 181, is to eliminate redundancies in, you know, somewhere like called South Burlington that has a huge staff, where they're like, if they're already checking the same things once at the municipal level, then they shouldn't have to do it again at the state level. And then obviously there's a difference between intent and statutory language, but the premise is that if Act 250s we're eliminating the redundancy of Act 250 review in places where it's currently redundant. So when you think about it like that. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask a question for Brian, because he's been in this stuff, so he'll be able to, I think, answer it better than my memory serves me. But wouldn't a lot of the criteria, if not all the criteria, or maybe the question is, what portion of the criteria that defines a tier 1B, I won't worry about tier 1A at this point, but a tier 1B, wouldn't that come from the future land use area?
The permit review criteria?
To become a tier 1B, you'd have to be in one of the future land use areas, either a village area,
Oh, yes, I mean,
a
for
center,
the
or
municipality,
growth
I
area.
mean, for it to mean anything for them to opt in, their municipality would need to include one of the big four,
Yeah. So those would be the
Yeah.
criteria, really, that's where you clear the hurdle. And then the opting in part, are there additional criteria when you decide to opt in?
My understanding is you're self-certifying that you are capable of implementing, essentially implementing your zoning regulations.
Okay.
How much the land use review board is gonna dig into, permit process at the municipal level, I'm not sure. My suspicion is not that much, because they're asking for a self-certification. I think tier 1A is gonna be well, I know tier 1A will be a very different thing. Tier 1A will have a formal application process, and I believe a hearing with the land use review board.
Much
But
higher standard, yeah.
yeah, so when we present our map to the land use review board, we will at that time have a list of municipalities that have opted in or expressed a desire to opt into that tier 1B status, and they will review it at that time. Time frame for that? Oh, 26, yeah, pretty good.
Question was, is there a time frame on that from Stephen Whitaker in the room? And we just said 2026. We don't know exactly when.
If we get the map done sooner and the regional plan done sooner.
And future land use
Yeah.
finishes their rules around tier 1A sooner.
Yeah,
They're
I
still
don't-
working on that?
well, I don't know if they've started working on it. I know it's on their list of things to do, but it's certainly
Okay.
something that I plan to ask about at the meeting at the end of the month, just to get a clearer picture, because based on, the reading that I've done, it just says this is something they will do, and I haven't seen any other language to indicate that they've been doing. You know, they're ramping up, so they've got a lot of immediate tasks. I believe there's a deadline on that. It might be January 26th for that application process. It might have even been in those slides that I shared. Let me just look at that really quick.
Yeah, so basically the application would be made by the town to the land.
Yes,
use
tier 1A guidelines will be put out by the Land Use Review Board by January 1st of 2026.
Okay,
Because we know what they're doing over holiday break this year. So at that point, it would make sense then that, well, I don't know if that means then it's open to public comment, or if the public comment period has already been completed and the guidelines are being published on January 1st, but regardless, seems to me that that would open the door for municipalities to apply for tier 1A status sometime after the start of next calendar year.
You refer to it as a rule. Do they have to go through rule?
I don't think it's a rule. I think it's just guidelines, and I think it's an application process that that they'll be publishing. So I'm not actually sure if that means that there's a separate review process or a special review process. I don't know, because it's both guidelines and an application, or it might be guidelines for the application. I'm not totally sure.
and can they apply for 1B now, or is that coming?
So the 1B part is not an application per se. It's a municipality expressing interest in 1B status and demonstrating that they have the capacity to actually implement their zoning regulations to satisfy that 1B designation. And so that, I believe, maybe you know this better than me. I think there's even model language for a resolution that a select board would pass to indicate, I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere. Maybe in the methodology, or maybe in a different BAPTA document, but you know, essentially it needs to come from the legislative body of the municipality, so that's the select board or the city council. And they have to express an interest and self-certify that the municipality is capable of doing so. And at that point, when we submit the map, we indicate which municipalities have expressed a desire for that 1B status for their, again, village areas, village centers, downtown areas, and downtown centers and planned growth areas. So those are the four future land use categories that could either be 1A, 1B, or 2.
And those guidelines those templates you just referenced will be part of the methodology. BAPTA will develop them. So it's in the under development section of the current methodology. So,
okay.
So
that's what I saw.
So, does the regional future land use map need to be completed for all of this to start working? Like it's all.
Yeah,
how
one
did
A,
it-
because only tier 1B areas towns can only apply to have tier 1B areas become tier 1A areas, and then tier 1B is just elaborating comes from the future land use map of the regional plan plus the self-certification form. So yeah, so that 1B can't happen until the regional plan and future land use map are adopted and approved by the land use review board. And then areas need to be 1B for the town to apply for them to be 1A.
Gotcha. Okay. So my committee, what does my committee have? Because remember, Jerry called this Alice's committee, so I'm going to call it my committee. You got any questions here? Anything you want to bring up? Any issues?
No, it's good progress.
So is this gonna, do you foresee that this is gonna put any extra burden on the towns?
Only if they want it.
Yeah, but what would they need to do? I mean, I'm just thinking.
I think they're gonna have to do more than look at a permit and say yes. They're gonna have
Yeah,
to.
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, all right.
For throughout the permitting process, and that'll be at least in part, in my understanding, what they're self-certifying.
Mhm.
So if you're a municipality without zoning, you cannot get 1B status.
Right.
You can still be, you could still be a downtown center, but you wouldn't be, you'd just be at tier 2, which means you're still following your existing permit approval process, and for projects that exceed whatever the threshold is, they're still gonna go through a formal Act 250 review.
Yeah, no change, yeah,
But-
status quo.
Yeah, so if as a municipality, you decide not to opt in to tier 1B, then nothing changes. If you opt into tier 1B, then for projects under 50 residential units, you need to perform due diligence for the town in terms of the permit review. I suppose the potential burden for the town is that the town's the one that gets sued and not the regional land use board, if someone doesn't like the permit decision, but that's beyond, my understanding, and not really, anything I've thought a whole lot about in terms of burden, but I mean, that's just one that pops to mind, is making sure that you're meeting your obligations under the zoning statutes to make sure that when you issue a permit, that it's issued on solid ground.
Yeah, and to kind of just build on that, it's like in towns that are doing that self-certification it's like, they're saying like, we're already subjecting applications to equally rigorous review as land use review board would under Act 250. They're saying that. So if that's true, then it's not really adding additional burden for them to have to fill the shoes of the land use review board. This is not CVRPC's official position. I personally have my doubts sometimes, but so it's like, if they're not really doing the due diligence they say they are or they will, then if they then actually do subject it to equally rigorous review, then that's a lot more due diligence on their part, but potentially, but that's
Gotcha.
one person's opinion.
Doug?
Does anyone know what % of Vermont towns don't have zoning ordinances? A ballpark?
Statewide,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I'm sure we could figure it out pretty.
I can search it. It's,
It's like 85% have zoning.
thank you.
Are we 3 in the region?
3 and 1 expired.
3 in, oh yeah, expired.
Well, 1
just
expired town plan, sorry.
Yeah. 2 down. Oh no.
3, we've got, Orange,
Just 3.
Williamstown, Roxbury,
Worcester.
and Worcester.
Yeah, we have 4 towns in our region that don't have zoning.
Williamstown just adopted a town plan, right? Was that them?
No, that was Washington.
Washington. And the town plan doesn't quite get you there for, what they would be looking for in terms of a 1D status. Not that Washington, to my knowledge, has expressed interest in pursuing 1B status for sure.
And John?
This is like a spilt milk gripe, but a big problem with this law, it doesn't deal with the reality of of a community, and kind of the hurt feelings if somebody were to, or some neighbors were to raise a concern, or the zoning administrator were to try to objectively review a project that is by a neighbor. And many zoning administrators live right in that town. And, hey, Joe, can you not do that? And so we had a project in town where our development review board got nearly skinned alive because they, consistent with our town plan, and our zoning, required certain measures be applied for a subdivision. And I mean, it was unbelievable. It was like a political coup. And so we're now gonna move 50 unit subdivisions down to the municipal level and expect a neutral review, an objective review that be the equivalent of a quasi judicial process at the district commission level. It defies all logic. In my every experience, this is a train heading for open water here, man. This is like, but whatever,
John, this
it's done.
sounds more like spilled beer, right, to me, but, we can only do what we can through the regional plan, and we can work with our municipalities to, you know, illustrate the potential challenges if they decide to opt into 1B, and I mean, I'll say this as delicately as I can, but that we maybe think they're not qualified for 1B status. It's not up to us. But again, we could highlight the potential challenges and pitfalls of pursuing 1B status when maybe you're more of a borderline case. And just really quickly, I wanted to mention, because I think I've been speaking a little bit in shorthand and saying, you know, that the 1B requires zoning, but it requires zoning and subdivision bylaws, so not just zoning. So that does make a difference. Not sure that well, I'm pretty sure it doesn't satisfy your issue that you point out, John, but I do want to mention that.
Well, you know, and so we're gonna have a bigger town, let's say, Brian, conduct the entire review. That would be, you know, the near equivalent to what Act 250 reviews. The town's not gonna call in experts, nor do they have the authority to petition Agency of Natural Resources experts to come in and speak on stormwater or wildlife habitat. So then they're gonna, in order to get that information, they're gonna ask the developer to provide their expert, which, you know, is not gonna be a neutral. It's just not gonna happen. This is, anyway, what are you gonna do? It's what it is. We gotta deal with what we got, but it's not gonna be the equivalent of Act 250 at the end of the day.
I don't think any of us are naive enough to think that, John, and it's all the more reason why I think it's important to stake a claim, if you will, to the rural areas and make sure those are properly defined so that we don't lose everything in a push for future development. See Mike's hand as well.
Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, I was just gonna go and say that we'll have to see what the expectation is. There certainly is a lot of discussion of this being somewhat of a one-for-one trade for is your zoning enforcing Act 250. And I'm not sure if that's a fair assessment. There's a lot of things that local zoning does that Act 250 does not. And so, you know, we can point to every Walmart, every Home Depot, they're all gone through Act 250. But you know, we have design review rules in the city of Montpelier in certain districts that would not allow those types of establishments to ever meet those types of codes. So in some places, in some ways, we do a better job of creating community and creating space. And that's what our downtown and our design review regulations do. We're doing more in some places and on some facts and less on others, in order to make our downtowns work and operate differently. So I'm not sure there. I know there's a lot of discussion of, you know, this is going to be a one-for-one. I don't know. I'm interested in seeing how this rolls out, as to whether or not that's what the Land Use Review Board expects as a one-for-one. Is the Land Use Review Board expecting us to, you know, do archaeological surveys? You know, I don't know any communities that do, but that's an Act 250 requirement, historic and archaeological. But I don't know if that level of expectation is going to be there. We're going to have to just kind of play it out and see where it goes. But I just wanted to put that out. I've heard, the 1-for-1 before, and I'm not sure that, and maybe that's not what people who voted for it expected. Maybe they expected that they would be voting for a 1-for-1. I'm not sure if that's where the land use review board is actually going to end up. So I'll be curious to see. But I did want to say there are other ways. It's more than just a 1-for-1. Can the municipality enforce the Act 250 rules? It's actually different. And I think there are some things that we as municipalities have been doing more and better than Act 250. And then there are going to be communities that don't have that capacity to be able to do those types of extra reviews. So it'll be interesting to see how this rule all rolls out.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike, and I gotta believe that some of that state level oversight will be passed down via the expectation if you're going after the 1A or 1B status, just as a quick aside on the archaeology piece. Wearing my other hat for the Clean Water Service Provider program here, any of the projects that we do in riparian areas that disturb soil require an archaeological review. So I've actually had a project that costs about $85,000 to implement, required a $16,000 archaeological review to make sure that no one ever built a fire next to an agricultural field that is currently protected by a berm. So we're literally taking a berm away, a berm that didn't exist when archaeology was happening, if you will. So I would be surprised if those measures don't work their way in some way. Anyway, we're getting a bit far afield here, so. John?
John?
Reel us in.
Yeah, well, just another reality check. If a large development is proposed and a municipality were to say, we're either going to condition you to the point where you cannot make the profit you are seeking or planning to make, or we're going to reduce the size of it or somehow constrain what the original proposal was, that developer can, litigate that. And I know in my little town, now maybe it's different, bigger towns, that there's not the capacity at the municipal level to defend against a deep-pocketed developer. And so at the end of the day, it winds up being a settlement. And, depending on what attorney you talk to, you either have to settle within the bounds of what's allowed for in zoning, or settlements are this unique, whatever part of law or practice of law where you can vary beyond what is allowed in zoning. And I've seen that done when I worked at the Agency of Natural Resources. They've tried, and I've actually, in my capacity as a regulator, pushed back against efforts by my agency attorneys and the Attorney General to try to cut settlement deals that were wholly inconsistent with statute and rule. I was actually successful in arguing it, but this seems to be a practice by many attorneys. And there was a case, it's a Public Utility Commission case down in Bennington, that the town was sued for simply taking a position at the Public Utility Commission as to what the town plant said and what the intent was of that language. And they got sued, and they were 100% accurate. It was clear on its face what that plan said, but anyone can sue. And after spending $100,000, the town of Bennington settled with the developer, and the settlement was a gag order that the town will not participate at the PUC tribunal any further. That's what the settlement. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that goes on when you have big, powerful developers, like we're seeing, these developers coming in, proposing developments already. And the one guy I think is from like Texas, and the other one's from Atlanta, Georgia. So God help the community that has those guys come to town, because it's not going to be pretty if you don't give them what they want. And I totally foresee, and again, different than at the state level, where they have a bastion of attorneys at the agency level, and then when that comes up short, they still have the assistant attorneys general that can step in and assist the agencies or take over from the agencies. They have the legal capacity, and they're on staff anyway. It's not like the budget goes up because they're litigating anymore. At the municipal level, it's not a pretty picture, and eventually developers do win.
Well, no, let's not forget towns can still opt not to be a tier 1B too. And I think some towns, we're gonna look at the regional land use and say, okay, well, we have a choice. Just as for the longest time, Waterbury remained a 10-acre town, 10-acre town, 1-acre town, until only the last 2 years or so, because it just enjoyed having the oversight, preferred to have that oversight of Act 250.
They actually chose to be a 1-acre town,
Yeah,
despite having
I don't know how many years,
subdivision
yeah.
reg and zoning. Really?
That's right.
Cool. I didn't know you could do that. Wow.
So
Yeah. Okay. Do we have a minute to just talk about the survey?
Yeah, that was the next thing I wanted to bring up. Thanks, Alice. We have 102 responses for the survey currently. We're running the survey for another month. Nikki has been out tabling. She's been to at least 3 communities, maybe 4 in the last week or so. So she's been out tabling at primarily at libraries, and has had some really positive feedback there. We printed out a bunch of paper forms because we thought there might be folks that would come to a public meeting that in person that are a little less inclined to engage their computer for surveys. And so far, I think we've only had a handful of folks actually fill out the paper version of the survey, which is great news for whichever staff member is going to be tasked with entering data, but also great news that for the most part, folks are just using the digital version of the survey. Not seeing anything overly surprising at this point. Definitely seems that there's, a push for a lot of the same things that we've already talked about. And, I guess maybe in another couple weeks, as we get a little closer to the end of the survey, it's might be worth looking at the information. Right now, I check it every day, and definitely seeing the Microsoft Forms that we use to publish the survey, it automatically graphs the responses. And right now I'm just seeing things move around too much to draw any real solid conclusions, other than the question about protecting ag and forest land, which seems to be almost universally accepted that is the right thing for us to do in our region. The only other sort of consistent response or set of responses I've seen is around potential industrial development and the desire to not really promote industrial development as a future land use type. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to fill out the survey themselves. If you need or would like to advertise the survey on Front Porch Forum, we did write a short blurb that you could use, that you might need to change the name of the town or some extremely minor details, but we'd be happy to push that language out to you so that you can post it on your local Front Porch Forum. I know that that's happened in Williamstown and Waterbury and
Waitsfield.
Waitsfield.
I posted it, and the other thing to do is to send it. I've got it to the select board, the full planning commission, and I sent it to the conservation commission. And Nikki will be here in Waitsfield on Thursday.
Yep, she'll be at the Joslin Library on Thursday. Did you have other questions about the survey, Alice?
Did I? No.
Or anyone?
I had a question, it's just, you limit to 3, you're supposed to like. I read through the whole thing without filling it out yet. But I find a ranked choice, I'm looking for a ranked choice voting, system rather than tell you I don't care about these other 5 or something like that, so I find it challenging to kind of do that, calculus. Because I could see deeper issues with the ones I have to leave out just to get, I'm only allowed 3 responses, so I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no fixing it. There
Yeah.
are pros and cons to asking questions using different structures. And just because you don't put something as a priority doesn't mean it's not important. It just means it's not what you perceive to be one of the highest priorities.
And on aggregate, the priorities still rise up.
Okay.
There were some that I wanted to say all of the above.
Yeah, that's how I felt,
But that-
6, 7,
yeah.
yeah.
That doesn't help.
but I'm not a statistician,
Mhm.
right?
Okay, does
Yeah.
anybody have anything else? Our next meeting is May 6th, which is a Tuesday, May 6th. And Will and I will have an agenda, Will, I, and Brian, and Will did a great job, I thought, on the packet this time around. I thought it was good. It really helped me ask Brian lots of questions at this meeting. So, does
We should-
anybody have anything else they want to ask or add, or shall we just wait for more excitement for May 6th?
Well, I mean, I just promote again that there is the spreadsheet, and if you've got ideas about other meeting topics that you would like to contribute, please do so. And seems like we'll revisit or not revisit, we will visit the construction cost topic for next week next meeting, since that portion of the packet is already ready to go. And if we
Yep.
wanna spotlight another one of those discussion topics, we're certainly open to suggestion as far as that goes.
We will. I've been poking everybody individually, so I don't, on the spreadsheet and issues and things, so we don't violate open meeting. But James, you have a question or something to say?
Where is this spreadsheet?
It is, there's a link to it. It's in the packet
It's in the packet? Okay, thank you.
that we'll send. If not, I'll make sure I email it to you.
I don't think it's in the packet, actually.
Will can share that out.
Yeah.
We'll be sure to include it in the minutes,
Yeah.
and the minutes will be out in the next couple of days, so that you'll be able to access it there.
We'll make sure to get it, James.
Will, can you make it?
Are you James or Jim?
Whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
I'll answer to both.
Okay, Fred, we got it.
Perfect.
Thanks. Okay, so with that, I think we can actually adjourn 6 minutes after time today, if somebody says
I
something.
would move that we adjourn the committee meeting for tonight.
Okey dokey, and I know we have seconds on that. So I guess we're all in favor of heading off to dinner now?
Aye.
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 And thank you, everybody. This was a very good meeting, I thought.
Night,
That's all.
everyone. Thank
Night,
you.
Thank you.
The methodology